From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined with our super producer, Paul the P.O. Decant. But most importantly, you are you and you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know.
Like parole officer?
Mm-hmm. Or, we're big fans of acronyms. Just mail us your favorite.
Yeah.
Mail us your favorite
He's peed off.
Oh, boy. Right now, usually Paul will have a talkback mic turned on so he can tell us how lame he thinks our jokes are.
Oh, he took it away because he was hurting our feelings.
So he's throwing us thumbs up and thumbs down.
That is not a thumb, my friend.
Let's hope we do him proud.
That was just shade. All right.
And we have, you can tell we all get along famously, folks, and we have a lot of levity on this show. And part of the reason that we're opening with some jokes today is because today we are going to examine something that is incredibly important, not just in the U.S., but in the world overall. And it's also something that isn't fully explored in your typical mainstream news stories. You'll maybe hear 5 minutes about something, right, on CNN or on MSNBC or Fox News or whatever your news program of choice is.
This is a topic today that you probably won't know a lot about unless it's touched your life in some way, very close, within a few degrees.
Absolutely. I mean, and now we are seeing some very alarmist, I would say reasonably so, headlines that is pushing some of this stuff to the forefront, which we'll get into as well. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, it's certainly not something that was across my day-to-day thinking.
Mm-hmm. Friends and neighbors, if you are a resident of the United States, you've probably heard about the burgeoning and long-standing problems with this country's justice and incarceration system. And our episode today focuses on another aspect of that system that the authorities, the politicians, and yes, the private prison companies would probably rather you not know much about. That is its effect on children. And as you know, if you are a longtime listener, one of Matt, Noel, and I's favorite things to do when we are tackling a topic of this magnitude is to find an expert. And luckily, this time we succeeded. We would like to introduce to you Julian Wyatt. Julian, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Julian, tell us about the organization you're a part of and what you do within that organization.
Yeah, so Forever Family is an Atlanta-based nonprofit that was founded in 1987 by Sandra Barnhill. She's still the current executive director and CEO. The work we do is pretty much aimed at maintaining and preserving the family bond for children or families who are experiencing incarceration. So one of our taglines is surrounding children with the love of family, but that's also like our approach as well. So one of the most popular and longest running programs is that of the Family Visitation program, where we once a month gather up all the children involved in the organization, and we provide transportation as well as meals to the children as well as caregivers. And we make about a 3-hour drive there and back to 3 of the 4 women prisons within here in Georgia. So that's Emmanuel, Lee Arundel, as well as Pulaski. Other than that, we just want to make sure that, children are still aware that, they're not alone with this experience. Mm-hmm. So even those for the parents who are incarcerated, we provide different workshops throughout the year so they can, feel confident about their abilities to still be involved in their child's life while they're, still serving their prison sentence. And for the caregivers as well, which is also left out of the popular narrative, we provide different support and services for them to ease the financial burden as they take care of, some of the children involved.
And for a real quick statistical background here, we know that the U.S. represents about 4.4% of the world's total population, but houses around 22% of the world's prisoners. And it was shocking to us. It was shocking to us that children were not included or were missed in the narrative, as you say. We'd like to ask a couple of questions about the kids themselves. do they have a typical age range, or does it go across a spectrum?
It's usually across the spectrum. So even for our organization, we work from infants all the way up through to the age of 18.
Wow. So these are, you said you're primarily servicing women's prisons. And so these are moms that you're going to visit.
Yes.
And you're taking the children to go visit their moms in prison.
Correct.
Have you actually physically gone along with some of these visitations?
I have. I went my first prison visitation back in 2014 when I was first interning at Forever Family. And it's a powerful and moving experience. We get to the organization about 5 o'clock in the morning. We provide, meals to the children. We try to just make it as upbeat and friendly as possible, though, because I know for some, they are excited. And also for some, it's kind of a difficult situation. But we make sure that they have food on the bus ride there. So when we get in there, we have to check in, which is like an hour-long process. It is no joke from background checks we all have to get. Once we get there, if you're a child, I think under the age of 13, you're still able to go into the Children's Center. And this is not at all 3 prisons. I think this is just maybe at Pulaski, one more, not for certain. I have to cross-reference that. And if you're over the age of 13 to 18, then you go to the general population. So I've had the opportunity to go into the Children's Center, actually for Mother's Day weekend, which was amazing. So we provided food, the mothers cooked, they had routines, and it's just so much physical connection and love. And since they know that I have direct contact with their children on a regular basis, they ask me questions about, how's Johnny doing in school? If he's, messing up here, feel free to give him a talk and pull him to the side. So it's just a great experience. You could tell that it benefits both the mother who's incarcerated as well as the child. So statistically wise, if you maintain this relationship, then those who are in prison are more likely to be conscious of their behavior while they're serving their time, and also it decreases the likeliness of recidivism that they'll return and reoffend. And for the child at the same time, that still having that connection ensures that they're not missing out on much, and they're still surrounded by that love and are able to then succeed and move forward and develop as a normal childhood.
And let's go back to something that you just mentioned that may amaze and surprise a lot of us in the audience here, and that is the process that not just the children, but you and everyone who attempts a visitation has to undergo in order to actually make it in to visit the people imprisoned. You said it's an hour-long process.
It is, and we try to get there as early as possible so we get to the front of the line and make sure that the children have as much time as possible to spend with their mothers. But you have to go through the metal detectors, and it's kind of dehumanizing in a sense. To the fact that once you get into this institution, then you kind of lose a sense of, yourself and freedom at the same time that you're giving up. So myself as, being a chaperone or a staff member, as well as the children as well, who are kind of serving, incarcerated, but outside of the institution at the same time. So.
Any kind of bureaucratic system like that, it always feels like you're in some kind of cattle call or you're stuck in some way. It's very claustrophobic, I think, is a word that I would use to describe it. I can't imagine for a child having to go through that.
And that's a great point about bureaucracies. Noel, as you just said, these are arduous organizations, some would say inherently. And when we're talking about bureaucracies for institutions that are seen as quote unquote justly punishing someone for taking a taboo or illegal action, then oftentimes the reforms of those bureaucracies fall to the bottom of the list when it comes to funding, when it comes to positive action of any sort. And one of the questions that was on our mind that we wanted to ask you is whether you or your colleagues or the caregivers, the parents, or even the children have encountered this bureaucracy acting in I don't want to say an antagonistic manner, but maybe an unhelpful manner.
Yeah, that's very true. So I think we do criminals. They're labeled as master status of always being criminals and need to be punished accordingly. We know, sometimes sentencing is not as rational or as in line in regards to the offense. But I think diminished expectations by society also believes that these kids of the incarcerated will end up with their parents, and so they treat them accordingly, and they don't believe they're going to amount to much and be successful. So it comes down to then the work that we do is. I guess eternal weeds in sociology, but like the labeling theory. So if you call these children, criminals, you say they're going to amount to only to what their parents have done and so forth. They're going to start to internalize that, and then it just repeats the cycle then of them, getting wrapped up in another system, and some of these times the likelihood of them going or being incarcerated increases and so forth. So we do our best to try to combat some of that as much as possible.
The idea of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Kind of,
Exactly.